Mining brings with it enormous change. On the one hand, mining is a technical project. Geologists and engineers and environmental scientists work together with the aim to efficiently remove a mountain down a railway line and out of a port as a saleable commodity. On the other hand, the act of mining is a social project. The people drawn to work in a mine must establish new relationships with suppliers, regulators, customers and near neighbours. Understanding and predicting the change associated with mining is the task of impact assessment professionals. Simply put, impact assessment is the process of identifying and responding to the future consequences of a current or proposed action. Social impact assessment is the process of analysing and monitoring and managing the intended and unintended social consequences, both positive and negative, of planned interventions and any social change processes invoked by those interventions. Social impact assessment is about people, their livelihoods, their culture, their customs, and their environment. Social impact assessment has transcended its original formulation as a technique for predicting social impacts as part of regulatory approval processes. It's now thought of more holistically as a process of managing impacts over the life cycle of a development. Engagement is at the heart of SIA. It is a combination of technical analyses and participatory activities with the people potentially affected by a project that gives SIA its analytical power. So, what is a social impact? A social impact assessment is something that it's experienced or it's felt by an individual, a social group or an economic unit. Impacts can be positive or negative. They can result from an action or the lack of an action. Impacts are distinct from social change processes because the way an individual experiences or responds to change will differ depending on their own unique circumstances. For a near neighbour, for example, the increase in traffic associated with the mine may be a nuisance or safety risk. Now, if you're the local mechanic, it probably represents a business opportunity. So far, we've defined SIA as a process, but it's also true that SIA can be thought of more broadly. SIA can be thought of as a field of research and practice with self-identified practitioners, as a discourse or a paradigm with an established body of knowledge, or even as a sub-discipline with its own theories and its own methods. What SIA is not is simply a document prepared to seek government approval for a project. Social impact assessment, it's important because it provides information for decision making. It promotes transparency and public participation in those decisions, and it identifies procedures and methods for ongoing monitoring and management. It reduces project risks and provides greater certainty for investors, government and society, and ultimately it contributes to sustainable development. Nowadays, many companies and funders have their own policy requirements to undertake periodic impact assessment and management because they believe it's worthwhile for ensuring project success. Examples include the International Finance Corporation's performance standards, which require the preparation of environmental and social management plans, and Anglo-American's Social and Economic Assessment Toolbox. Social impact assessment can be considered as a number of distinct yet iterative phases within an adaptive management process. The first phase is the scoping phase and the formulation of alternatives. The scoping phase determines the scale, the timing and the focus of the assessment. It ascertains who is likely to be impacted and identifies the actions that are likely to result in impacts. Alternative options are usually formulated for later analysis, and an initial appraisal of the impacts of these alternatives is undertaken. The output of the scoping phase may be the definition of the objective, the scope, the scale, priority issues and the terms of reference for the phases of impact assessment and management to follow. The second phase involves profiling and the preparation of social baseline studies. Profiling consists of understanding the communities and stakeholders potentially impacted by the activity through social and economic research. Baselines are the appraisal of the state of a community before the activity has taken place. Both provide a benchmark against which potential impacts can be anticipated. After a review of secondary information and the identification of knowledge gaps, a program for the collection of primary data is developed. The third phase is predictive assessment and the revision of alternatives. During this phase, the scale and the significance of potential impacts are evaluated using both technical and participatory methods. The choice of methods largely depends on the nature of the activity. The fourth phase is to develop management strategies to avoid and mitigate negative social impacts and enhance positive impacts. The output of this phase might be a social impact management plan, an agreement with affected communities, or standard operating procedures for high-risk issues. Phase 5 is monitoring and reporting. This phase involves the collection and analysis and the dissemination of information over time, and it can assist in refining the assessment, tracking the progress of social impact management approaches, and then reporting back to communities and government. The final phase is to evaluate and review the assessment and management process. An active and dedicated process of evaluation will assist in refining and improving future approaches. SIA is both a decision-making and a project improvement process. By understanding the social context and the potential for the project to interact with that context, better projects can be designed or better decisions made to leave a positive long-term social legacy.